Instructions are going to be right here, and you can even download an app that's pretty handy. Well, we're going to go over this, and I recommend it. Now it's been taken out of that case. You want to leave these indoors. If they're outside, they have a tendency to draw moisture and humidity and go bad. But you're going to want to test the water every other day for the next 30 days, and then after that, it's once a week.
Okay.
And the reason you're testing it so much in the beginning is because it takes a solid 4 to 6 weeks for that plaster to cure. So you probably got at least another month to go. And as that plaster cures, it will do things to your water you want to see on top of, and the way it knows what's going on is by testing it. And with these test strips, you can see these areas that are bracketed in that say ideal all the way down. That's the colors that you want to get to.
Okay.
And the first one you're testing for is the chlorine, and that's going to come from those chlorine tablets. And you have at the equipment, I'll show you, there's a chlorine dispenser over there. And on the top of that dispenser, there's just a dial you turn up and down. So if you test the water and you don't have enough chlorine, you just turn the dial up. If you've got too much chlorine, you just turn the dial down. That's pretty straightforward. Now on the back of that feeder, you have something called a dual clear cartridge or a Nature 2 cartridge. And there's a startup cartridge in there now that will last for 2 weeks from today. Anthony and Sylvan had sent that other one along that one's on top of your grill there. And that one will last you for 6 months. And what that cartridge consists of are just a bunch of real small beads that are covered in something called silver nitrate. And as that water runs across that silver, they will dissolve the silver into the pool, and that silver will kill things for you like the chlorine does. So the benefit of that to you is instead of having to maintain your chlorine at the 2 to 4 parts per million, you can maintain your chlorine below the ideal range at 0.5 to 1 part per million. So for people that have an aversion to chlorine, those things work out fantastic. And there's not a test for that silver nitrate, so that's something you have to mark on your calendar and know when that cartridge expires.
Every 6 months then?
Yep.
Okay.
If you choose not to replace it, that's fine. Just bump the chlorine up and maintain a higher chlorine level.
Okay.
But if you choose not to replace it and don't bump the chlorine up, then you're going to have tons of problems. So you want to make sure that mark it on your calendar and replace it or bump the chlorine up.
And that's the starter one you said lasts for 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Okay.
Yep. The next one down is the total chlorine, and that would tell you when it's time to shock your pool. And you want to shock this pool periodically. And you have that ozone generator over there. And so the bubbles you see coming in, that's what's left over from that ozone gas. And that's going to cut way, way back on the amount of times you would shock your pool. So if you talk to people at the pool store, they'll tell you need to shock it every 1 to 2 weeks, probably during the swimming season. Because you got that ozonator, you should probably be able to go a good 6 weeks without shocking the
Oh, wow.
pool.
Okay.
But you can follow this if you want. If you get above the ideal range, then you'll know it's time to shock it.
Okay.
And that shock that Randy had sent out here, that brand is 1 pound per 10 to 12,000 gallons, and there's a scoop in there. And just probably a pool this size, probably throw in a scoop and a half, I guess, is probably about what it's going to take. If you buy the shock down the road, the best way to buy a system, these 1 pound bags, just throw in 2 bags at a time. But when you shock the pool, you want to make sure the pump is on, the water circulating, and just broadcast it over the surface with the pump on. And typically you want to stay out for a good 3 to 5 hours. If you get in there sooner than that, it's not the end of the world. It might dry your skin out, make your hair feel brittle, but it's not the end of the world.
Okay.
Another time to shock the pool is if you get a really heavy rain, and not just a passing shower, but one of those 2, 3, 4 inches of rain in a day or two. Not a bad idea to shock the pool. There it goes. And the shock that you want to get, it doesn't matter the brand, but if you look at the first active ingredient, it's going to say calcium hypochlorite, and that's the type of shock you want to use down the road.
Okay.
Then what they talked about in red is bromine, and you're not using bromine in your pool, so just disregard that bromine test.
Okay.
The next one's the pH, and the ideal is 7.2 to 7.6. And that's the one that's going to give you the most grief over the next few weeks. And the pH is the reason you're testing this water so much to start off with. Because as that plaster cures, it's going to have a tendency to go above the ideal range. And whenever you see your pH get above the ideal range, that's when you need to add some more of the muriatic acid. And a pool this size, if it just gets a little bit above the ideal range, you're going to put in somewhere between a pint and a quart of acid. And you don't need to get out anything special, measure out a pint to a quarter of a gallon. You just eyeball it, just get it close. If it gets as high on the chart as it can go or off the chart, it's going to take a minimum of a quart and possibly up to a half of a gallon. And what you'll find is next week the pH won't go as high and you won't have to put in as much acid because the plaster will have cured some. And the week after that it will probably be less, and the week after that. Every week gets easier and easier to take care of. when you put the acid in, number one, make sure the pump is on, the water circulating. And just walk along the edge, pouring how much you're going to pour in. Just don't pour it over any shallow like the sun shelves or steps or benches.
Mm-hmm.
And literally within 10, 15 minutes of putting the acid in, it's plenty safe enough to jump in and go swimming. That's not an issue at
Okay.
all.
Wow.
Now, if you put in too much acid and the pH gets below the ideal range, just put in some regular Arm & Hammer baking soda. In a pool this size, it'll be just a 1 pound box of baking soda is all it's going to take. So on the high side acid, on the low side baking soda. You can get that if you want, if it's your work calling you.
I'm just gonna hang it up because I finished.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
It's not always good to hang up on your work, but that's your choice.
This is more important.
Now, the next thing listed is the alkalinity, and the ideal range is this 80 to 120 parts per million. And the alkalinity, you can think of it as a base that the pH draws off of. So typically, if the alkalinity is high, it pushes the pH up. Typically, if it's low, it pulls the pH down. They usually track one another like that.
Okay.
And you can treat the alkalinity the same way as the pH. So if your alkalinity is too high, you're going to put in acid. If it's too low, you're going to put in baking soda.
Okay.
The next one down is total hardness. That's the calcium level in your water. And the water in your pool is a lot like the blood in your body. If you don't have enough calcium in your blood, it's going to leach it out of your bones. If you don't have enough calcium in that water, over time it's going to etch that plaster. And if you wind up having issues with the plaster, the first thing the pool builder or the plaster company is going to want to see is a printout from the pool store to show you've been getting your water tested periodically.
Right.
And the first thing they're going to look at is that hardness. If it's consistently below the ideal range, they're going to tell you it's not like changing the oil in your car and your motor blows up. It'll be on you. So that hardness was one that's really important to get where it needs to be to start off with.
Okay.
This last one's cyanuric acid, and that's just the active ingredient. Most people see on a bottle it's called stabilizer or conditioner. And what that does, it just protects the chlorine against UV rays from the sun. So if you don't have enough of that, you'll find you go through more chlorine than you want to. And it's literally just a one-time application at startup, because all chlorine tablets have that cyanuric acid in them. So once you've got the level to where it needs to be at startup, as those tablets dissolve, it'll maintain the level for you. So it's just, don't buy any extra thinking you're going to use it down the road. You won't.
Okay.
Just buy the absolute minimum you're going to need.
Okay. And how do you adjust the hardness of the?
Well, if it's too low, which the majority of the time that's what it is, you'll get some calcium increaser or hardness increaser, just depending on where you buy it. It's called all kinds of different stuff.
Okay.
That's usually the two common names, is either calcium increaser or hardness increaser.
Okay.
If it's too high, which never happens, not on city water, but you can put in metal out. Calcium is actually a type of metal,
Yeah.
and you can just put a little bit of that in there.
Okay.
Dip it in there. And with these strips, you take it out and you hold it level for 20 seconds. You don't want to stand it up where the water runs from tab to tab, and you don't want to shake that water off. And you can see you're going to hold it just like this. And you can see how those tabs are turning a color.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one's the chlorine, and of course it's showing that there's just zero chlorine in your pool.
right.
Yeah.
The next one down is the total chlorine. It's down here also, but
Uh-huh.
I'll throw some shock in there. The next one down is the pH.
Uh-huh.
And it's a little bit on the low side, so I've got some baking soda, so I'll throw some baking soda in there. How much acid did Randy have you put in here to start off with?
It was 10
10
gallons.
gallons?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one down is the alkalinity, and this will be on the low side too, but when I throw that baking soda in there, it'll bring up the pH and the alkalinity both. The next one is the hardness, and it's certainly not that deep purplish color. You can see it's a real light
Uh-huh.
purple. So you want to take a water sample to the pool store, again, have them test it, give them the gallons of your pool, and then based on that, they'll tell how much of that hardness you need to put in there to bring it up to where it needs to be.
Okay.
And then that last one's the cyanuric acid. That's
Right.
that stabilizer conditioner. And it's just really low. And that's to be expected. That one's not critical at all, but probably by the summer months you want to get that one up where it needs to be.
Okay.
So you feel clear as mud?
It's you can rewatch it on the video and
All right, I'm going to go grab my baking soda. I'm going to grab my salt so I can cut that pipe off for it. Surface area times the average depth times 7.5, which means nothing, but that's how it comes up, the gallons of your pool.
yeah.
But what their computer doesn't take into account is the volume of water that sun shelf takes up, the
Right.
steps, the bench, the swim out. You know, and you got concrete there as opposed to water.
Right.
So,
So it's probably not 19.5
oh, no,
then.
it's probably. How deep is this pool?
Well, we never measured it, so I don't On the plan it says 6 feet, but I don't know what I don't know what it came out to be.
You know, I'd probably tell them 15,000 gallons.
Yeah.
That'd be a good place to start. And if you need more chemicals, you know, then bump it up to 16. If you're overshooting it at 15, then go down to 14. But again, you're always better off figuring on the low side. So I'd start off at 15.
Okay.
And then that'll probably get you pretty close.
Okay.
All right, the pool equipment, that's what we're going to talk about next. I'll go over the water flow first and then go back and talk about the valves.
Okay.
But this is the main pump for the system. And like it shows, that's the suction side, and that arrow shows the water flow.
Gotcha.
So the water gets sucked in this way, travels up, goes into the filter, out of the filter on this side. Most time it's going to loop around to the back side, come to that chlorine feeder, and I'll open this up in a minute. Then here's the dial you would turn up and down.
Okay.
So 1's the minimum, 6 is the maximum, and you can be anywhere in between. So if you need more chlorine, you turn it up. If you got too much chlorine, you'll turn it down.
Okay.
Once it's gone through there, it follows this return path, which then takes to this ozone injector, and that's where the ozone gas is created up in that black box.
Uh-huh.
Gets introduced to the pool, and of course the results are the bubbles you see coming out over there. And then goes right back out to those return eyeballs.
Okay.
Now that ozone gas, it's a real unstable gas. It does all its killing in about 15, 20 feet of pipe. So by the time it gets back to the pool, it's pretty much all consumed up.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about it coming out all the way around the pool to do what it needs to do. It's going to do everything it does on contact underground. Now you've got a couple valves on here. And these valves work the same way. They're just going to turn different things off and on.
Right.
Hold on a minute. So the way these valves work is they have a tab on one side that says off, and that handle's on the other side. And whenever that off tab is directly over a pipe, that pipe is going to be off.
Okay.
So right now that off tab is over that pipe that says cleaner,
Yep.
which has nothing to do with the cleaner that's running around the bottom of your pool. But on the far side, I screwed in a fitting that has a solid door on the face of it.
Uh-huh.
And that's the other end of that cleaner line.
Okay.
So if you ever needed a cleaner for whatever reason, it's a lot easier to have a pool line put in there when you're building the pool, as opposed to once the pool is built, trying to put a line in doesn't work. So
Okay.
chances are you'll never ever use that for anything. You'll probably leave that off. And all these valves have these thumb screws on there, so you can tighten that down and it would lock it in place.
Okay.
And a good reason to keep that off is because again it has that solid door over the face of it.
Yeah.
Well, if you were to rotate that around, well, it can't pull water from here anymore, and it can't pull water there because it has that door. Within a half hour or so, you'll destroy the wet end on that pump.
Okay.
So I'm just going to tighten that down. Chances are, again, you're never going to use that.
Okay.
And where you're pulling the water from are these 3 valves right here. And this is a little bit different from what most people are used to. Usually when you see a handle perpendicular to the pipe, it's closed.
Yeah.
But in the pool industry, it's wide open. You can see that off tab not over the white pipe.
Right.
So where you're pulling the water from is those main drains in the bottom of the pool.
Yep.
The skimmer.
On the left.
Yep. And the skimmer on the right.
Okay.
Now when you want to change this is anytime you're brushing any type of sand or grit towards those drains at the bottom, you'll find there's not a whole lot of suction there until you isolate the drain.
Okay.
So the best thing to do is whenever you brush the pool, if you can rotate those around, now both of the skimmers are off.
Yeah.
And now you're pulling everything from the main drain.
Yeah.
So now if you're at a brush towards those main drains at the bottom, you'll see it would pull that debris in there a whole lot faster. And of course, when you're done, you'd probably want to open those back up.
Yeah.
Another time you may want to change these, say if a storm came through and the top of the pool is just covered with grass and bugs and leaves, whatever.
Yeah.
You could turn the main drain down,
Yeah.
and that'll make those skimmers work stronger, and you'll see it pulls that debris off the top faster
Okay.
for you. Or say if you had a prevailing wind and everything was wound up down there at the shallow end of the pool.
Right.
We don't turn the deep one completely off. Maybe just choke it off a little bit to make that one work stronger. Whatever
Okay.
end of the pool you get the most debris at, that's the skimmer you don't work in the strongest.
Okay.
for. Now this line goes out to your clean out there around the front of the house.
Okay.
So if you wanted to drain some water, you got a couple different options. You can hook a garden hose up to the spigot,
Yeah.
or with the pump on, pump water out, or you can just open that up and now water's pumping out of there, probably around 40 gallons a minute. That's nothing you want to go in the house and forget about.
Yeah.
You'll certainly drain that water down in your pool in a hurry.
Okay.
And if you get a bunch of rain and it overflows, it's just going to get the deck wet, get the ground wet, and
Yeah.
it's going to hurt anything.
Right.
The worst that will happen is the skimmers are below the water level and they can't skim off the top anymore.
Okay.
All right,
Yep.
that's going to be for the water features.
Okay.
The one that says fountain,
Yep.
that's going to be the bubbler and the sun shelf.
Okay.
And then the waterfall side,
There's the waterfall.
that's marked left, middle, and right, or whatever they're marked. You
Yeah.
can adjust each one individually.
Okay.
But it's not a bad idea. Like whenever I shock the pool at my house, I always turn the water features on so you get that good chlorinated water going through the system.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea, particularly during the summer months, to turn this on for a couple times a week at least, 10, 15 minutes. Because if it sits idle for weeks at a time, that basket will get really green and funky.
Yeah.
The lines will get really funky. You turn it back on, it's just going to blow a bunch of yuck in your pool.
Okay.
You can adjust the height of the thing. So you can kind of do whatever you want to do with those valves.
Okay.
Now you could turn, if you were to rotate that around and have the waterfalls off, they just ran on by itself.
Right.
You can do that for short periods of time, but it creates a lot of back pressure. So it's nothing you want to do all day, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then below the light, or the waterfall pump,
That's the light
the
one.
light switch.
Yep.
And you guys have on yours, you've got that 14 different choices.
Oh.
So every time you turn that light switch off and back on immediately, it's going to advance to a new program.
Oh. Okay. I didn't know
And you
that.
can go to Jandy, Jan, same people that made the pump,
Yeah.
the Jandy.com or Zodiac, and look at the LED light, and it
Yeah.
will list out for you your choices.
Okay.
So if you're at this Caribbean blue and you want to get to this one that says
How many
Fat
times you
Tuesday, sometimes you got to turn it off and on to get to the one that you want.
Okay. Good to know.
And then the plug-in that you have over there,
Yeah.
it's GFI protected,
Yeah.
and that's tied into your pool lights. If you turn the lights on, they don't come on. You want to make sure that
Check
GFI
that.
is not
Okay. Okay.
So far so good. You feel pretty good about the valve?
Yep. Yep. Feel good about the valves.
The time pump that you have, this can turn the filter pump off and on. And the pump, it'd be nice if you could run it non-stop for probably the next 2 or 3 days anyway till that water clears up.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can go ahead and set it up on a time clock. What I tell people is oftentimes you can equate the average high temperature for the month with how many hours your pump should run. So for example, if the average high for the month is in the 90s, it needs to run a solid 9 hours a day.
Okay.
If the average high for the month is in the 50s, then you can run it 5 hours a day or thereabouts. You wouldn't have to run it quite as much because you got such a big pump. But in the summer, you'd have to run it that much. But the winter, you probably go back to 4 hours.
Okay.
Regardless, it makes zero difference when it runs, morning, afternoon, evening, people swimming, not swimming. Doesn't matter when it runs, it just needs to run
Okay.
every day.
Okay.
The instruction how to operate this, and right here it says programming instructions.
Yeah.
And this dial is a 24-hour dial, so it's got an AM and a PM on there.
Yep.
You familiar with this type of time clock?
No,
A
I
little bit?
just, yeah, no, I just, it
And
seems,
so to set the time of day, just like it says, you pull this dial out and rotate it around to whatever time it is. And let's get
almost noon.
close to noon.
Yep.
Then you have these two trips. One of them says on,
Uh-huh.
one of them says off.
Uh-huh.
So for example, if you want this to come on at 9 in the morning and run till 5 at night, well, the on trip you put on there whatever time you want it to come on, the off trip at whatever time you want it to go off, and again, it makes zero difference when it runs.
Yeah.
As that dial rotates, once that off trip gets to there, it would turn it off, and when that
Uh-huh.
on trip gets around there the next day,
It'll
it just
turn it
turns it
back
back on.
Okay.
And I'm going to go ahead and leave the on trip there and take the off trip off. Because if somebody were to come over here and turn this off tonight or whatever, when that on trip gets around here
It'll turn
tomorrow
it back
morning,
on.
yep. So that way, because you want this thing to run if you can, let's say the next couple days.
Yeah.
And then you can change it off and on just by loosening it up, sliding it around.
Okay, that's easy enough.
And so these trips are going to override anything you do manually. So if you were to turn that off to do some maintenance like we're getting ready to do, and you jump in the car and drove out of town,
Yeah, and forgot.
yep.
It'll
When that
turn-
comes around, it'll turn it
turn
on.
back
Same
on.
way if you leave it running, it'll come around and shut it off.
Okay.
So the pump basket, and empty it as needed.
How do you take?
So the first thing you do is turn the pump off like
Yeah.
we had done.
Okay.
The safest thing to do after that is on top of the filter, you have this air release valve.
Ah, yeah.
So you would open that up so if there's pressure on this system, it relieves the pressure.
Yep.
And then it's with the heel of your hands, that lid would pop over, it would come off, and you would take this basket out and empty this thing as needed. Just tap it out over there like those rocks.
Sure.
Speaking of rocks, I forgot to tell you that the pump baskets, you're going to want to find a, or did I tell about putting a rock in the
Put, yeah,
baskets?
put them out in the.
Okay, good, in the
yeah.
pump baskets?
Yes.
Yeah. And below the basket, there'll be some sand and grit and sediment, particularly this first time.
Yeah.
It's made it through the holes here. It's designed to go through the impeller, and it's going to get filtered out. So you're going to have to worry about digging any of that stuff out of there.
Okay. Get the big stuff out.
Yeah, this will catch the big stuff. And when this goes back in, on the front side there's a hole.
Yep.
On the back side there's a notch.
Yep.
So when it goes back in there, that notch needs to go to the back, and that hole goes to the front like
Okay.
that. On the underneath side of this lid, there's an O-ring, and you'll want to lubricate that, usually once every 3 to 4 months, every quarter, however you want to think of it. And you never want to put on there Vaseline or petroleum jelly. Petroleum-based products will eat that up.
Okay.
So all you want to use either a Teflon or silicone-based lubricant.
Okay.
And if you can't find it at the hardware store, just next time you go to the pool store, they carry tubes of it in there and last you well over a year.
Okay.
And before you put it back together, you want to make sure this O-ring is clean and the seat is going to sit against this clean so you get a good seal. When it goes back on, it starts at an angle like that.
Yep.
Line there it says start, line there it says start. Lines up with the end of the out pipe.
Okay.
And it just goes until now it says locks. You know, it's locked
Gotcha.
in place.
Okay.
Chances are you won't see much of anything in that one. And it gets its water supply somewhere. I think I saw on this wall, there's 2 main drain covers down there on that side wall. And so since they're up on a side wall, it's not going to ever pull in any dirt or anything, but you would do the same thing. You would just make sure the switch is off there, and then you can just open that up.
Okay. And how often did you say to check those?
Just, you can probably check them once a week anyway.
Okay.
I don't know that you need to empty them once a week, but if you're just out here doing maintenance, walking by, just look in them.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of times, during certain times of year, if you got a whole lot of stuff in the pool, a lot of times you wind up with a whole lot of stuff here. So
Yeah.
you'll kind of get to know if it's been a mess and you need to come home and check things.
Okay.
So this chlorine feeder on the back side, there's that startup cartridge
Yep.
with that Nature 2.
Yep.
So this is going to last you for 2 weeks from today.
Okay.
And what you're going to want to do is take a picture of that box top or save that box top.
Yep.
Because it has the part number for the one that fits into the unit that you guys have.
Gotcha.
On the front side, this is where those chlorine tablets are going to go. this in. Oh, it's got a little. More than that. And it probably wouldn't be a bad idea. Oh, at some point, you see this drip line right here?
Yeah.
I mean, eventually that's gonna
Load.
wash away that pad, and those pads are gonna start leaning on you.
Yep.
So it may be a good idea to put flashing up there, or just, you know, a gutter and drop it down over there or something, so you
Okay.
don't wind up with get the pads out of cattywampus.
Yeah.
Now this chlorine, these lids don't fit tight. They're not designed to fit tight, so this chlorine gas can escape.
Mm-hmm.
So these need to do as simply as good and well ventilated. Boy, they even double bag this. And so that, obviously not your house. I wouldn't leave it in the garage. Cars, motorcycles, tools, everything in your garage, in a matter of months, it starts to rust pits, and with a year, you'll just destroy everything metal in your garage. So a lot of times people just get like a small deck box,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll just leave them outside in the deck box. So this will hold between 7 and 9 tablets, depending on the thickness of the tablets.
Mm-hmm.
And you can wait till it's empty and fill it up, or you can open it up periodically and top it off. And you'll probably find with that ozonator, you'll probably go through, you'll probably go through 2.5, 3 tablets a week in the summer, and you're probably only going to go through 2 or 3 tablets a month in the winter.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so in the winter months, I wouldn't necessarily fill that all the way up, because you want the dial turned all the way down, you'll probably get too much chlorine in your pool. So in the winter months, just put in a couple at a time. But in the
Okay.
summer months, you can certainly put a lot more in there.
Okay.
And at my house, I never go above that hole right here,
Uh-huh.
because there's this sleeve, and if you put too much in, it makes it hard to get that the cap back on.
Okay.
Now on the underside side of this lid, there's an O-ring under there.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people, if you can, to tap that out and seat it first, because if it stays up inside there, it's really easy to pinch that O-ring. If it doesn't come out by tapping on it, you can take a screwdriver and dig it out. Just be real careful not to scar it. Or it has a little button here.
Mhm.
You can push that button down. The handle would come off. That little retainer ring comes off, and you can see there's the O-ring
Oh wow.
right there.
Okay.
And what I always do is you can, you know, slide it off in there and seat it, but I just, at my house, I always just put that on there to make sure it's not bubbled out anywhere.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because once you pinch that O-ring, I mean, it just takes once and it's done.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to open it all the way to 6, because there's just 0 chlorine in your pool.
Okay.
Now the filter that you have is a cartridge filter.
Yeah.
So if somebody talking about backwashing, there's no backwashing involved. Those cartridges come out, you just hose them off with a garden hose and a good strong nozzle periodically.
Okay.
I'd be glad to open it up and show it ozonator, or with the ozonator, what filters look like. Some people want to see them and some people don't. It's up to you if you
Go
want
on.
to show them to you.
Yeah. I'd be interested. Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing you do again is turn the pump off like we had done.
Right.
Open that air release valve.
Yep.
And then you'd use a 9/16 inch socket. Take this band off here. There's plenty of stuff on YouTube about this. The instructions are right here on that plate. You're going to want to clean these cartridges the first time within the first 4 to 6 weeks of the pump running, and then every 3 to 5 months after that.
Okay.
So like at my house, I clean mine the first time of the year, right when all that yellow pollen
Yeah.
is done.
Yep.
And then I clean mine again right on the 4th of July, and then I clean mine again right around Halloween. And at my house, that works fine.
Okay.
Some people have to clean them a little more if you got dogs that swim or a mess. You don't got that much of a mess going on back here.
No. Not anymore.
And if you clean them on a good schedule, they should last a good 5, 6, probably even 7 years.
Okay.
If all you do is clean them every year or so, that's probably about all you're gonna get. It's about a year. You take them out and clean them. Got a manifold this off of there. When it goes back on, it needs to line up just like that. And these cartridges, they're just lift out. You can use a garden hose with a good strong nozzle. Go back and forth and hose these off.
Okay.
And you see, you've got these wear bands on here, and you'll see 1 or 2 or 3 of those split, and that's fine. Once you've seen them all split, you know it's time to replace the filters.
Okay.
And at the bottom of the tank, particularly this first time, there's a lot of that grit.
Yeah.
And to get it out, there's a drain cap right there.
Okay.
And you can take that cap off. And with the top off, you can just literally, if you wanted to, you just turn the pump on and pump pool water in there, or drag a garden hose back in here, whatever works for you.
Okay.
Between the top and the bottom half of this, here's another O-ring. These get lubricated every so often, and then before put it back together, make sure it's good and clean also.
That doesn't need lubrication though, right?
Yeah, I usually lubricate mine about once a year or so. You'll know when you peel it, when you open this up, if it's feeling really dry. So I'm gonna put some on there. This will just sit right back up on there. Side of that.
Are those cartridges or the filters just usually at the pool store, or do those you need like order online and have them delivered type of thing?
Both.
Okay.
I mean, you know, the ones that are in here are really good ones.
Yeah.
They're a little bit harder to find. They make some that are a little bit cheaper, and that's what the pool stores have a tendency to sell. And you won't get near the life out of them.
Okay.
Move that around so I have the plates there so you can see it. Band, when it goes back on, it can go back on any direction. That nut to the front, the side, whatever. And you've got that T-nut, and when it goes back together, it needs to stand up like this. You don't want to put that in there and have that sticking out to the front. It's not grabbing onto much.
Yeah, okay.
It's got a diagram right here on the side that tells you when you tighten this down, you don't want the gap between those two halves to exceed a 1/16 of an inch. Just get really close to touching.
Okay.
Now it's at a certain point, stop and just tap on that just to help snug it up a little bit. So you can see at the end, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
Now, anytime you've been in there to clean that basket,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly anytime you've been in here to clean the cartridges, you turn the pump back on, you leave this air release valve open,
Okay.
and the pump, as long as there's a little bit of water in there, it's a self-priming pump, so it'll take off on its own.
Okay.
And you hear a bunch of air come out. Then once you start getting a good solid stream of water, that's when you can turn that to close it. exhaust stream.
Uh-huh.
Now, on top of the filter, it has this outer ring that you can rotate that says clean and dirty.
Okay.
And the theory is once those cartridges have been cleaned, it's that clean indicator, the clean pressure.
Uh-huh.
And once it goes from here to there, it's time to clean the filters.
Uh-huh.
But I tell people for the most part disregard that because it usually takes a year and a half to go from here to there, and by then you've destroyed the filters.
Yeah, okay.
So all this is good for is within that 3 to 5 months, which would be the normal cleaning cycle. If they went from here to there, you know, they just got really dirty really fast. Somebody came out early and cleaned it.
Okay.
And if you're going to take readings, just make sure all the valves are in the same position. And even this one, you can see if you open it up, see it drops way down.
Yeah.
If you had it sit there at that, and then you went here and closed it,
Right.
it's not dirty.
Right.
You were just
Yeah.
moving
You
valves.
just had your valves misconfigured.
All right. It's got a little power light here on the side.
Okay.
It's pretty much needs nothing except it's got power to it.
Okay.
And just because you see you got bubbles coming out,
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean the thing's working. So every time I clean the filters at my house, I open up mine and look at here to make sure it's actually working. And you can see it has those two little lights, that one and that one.
Yeah.
See it glowing that greenish color a little bit.
Yeah.
So if it's not glowing, you see if the pump's off, it shuts off.
Uh-huh.
So you want to make sure that the pump is on.
Uh-huh.
But if the pump is on and you don't see that glow, there on the side there's a fuse, so if there's a nearby lightning strike or got water and it blows that fuse.
Okay. Check that.
And then if the pump is on and the fuse is good and they're not glowing,
Yeah.
that means these relays have run their course. They're no good anymore. They need to be replaced.
Okay.
You can call Dell at their 800 number. You can go to their website. And you don't necessarily have to have anybody come out and change them for you. You just pull up that screw,
Yeah.
unplug it,
Yeah.
and pull that one out of the mixing chamber and just put a new one in.
Okay.
And if you're going to replace one, just replace them both. And you'll probably get, you know, probably 2 years, well not 2, you'll probably get 3.5 years out of those things. But still open it up and just check on them.
Okay.
And then on the spigot, I put this little white cap.
Uh-huh.
And it's just a 3/4 inch cap. And it used to be right here. And I took that cap off of there, put that little barbed nipple fitting on there.
Yeah.
And so it's a good idea to keep that handy, because if you're out here doing yard work or you hit that and break that off somehow,
Yeah.
you can take the fitting off and put that cap in its place to get another one.
Okay.
And that's not a bad idea. On here, it's got this little tag that says change check valve and ozone tube annually.
Okay.
I don't replace mine every year. Whenever I have to replace the relays, I just get another one with that tube and the check valve at the same time.
Okay.
All right. We'll do a shot in the school. Do 0 and see if we use some. Did you guys live in Virginia or just have somebody that went to that school?
I went to Virginia.
Did you?
Yep.
And my daughter went to Washington Lee.
Okay.
Out there. That's a good school.
Yeah.
So is Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Are you an engineer?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things you're known for, right?
Yeah.
Engineering school.
Yeah.
Alright. But the cleaner, you got 2 ways to operate this.
Okay.
And the arrow represents the cleaner. So you can run it on the bottom or have it climb the wall.
Okay.
And the default, when I first put it in there, was 2.5 hours. If you were to select that, now it's just gonna clean the bottom and not climb the wall, and the default's 1.5 hours.
Okay.
But with that plus and minus, you can always increase whatever hours of operation you want to have the thing go.
Okay.
But if you're going to run it, you might as well have it climb the walls too, I think.
Yep.
And it's programmable for up to 1 week at a time if you want to program it to come on and go off at a certain time every day, and it will do that for 1 week. Chances are, you know, you're gonna just put it in there and use it, and I don't know, you have to program it every day coming on and going off, but that's, I mean, like I say, you got a pretty clean backyard, I don't think you need to do that.
Yeah.
But again, everything it's gonna pick up, it's gonna collect
Mm-hmm.
internally. And if you see that cleaner get to the side wall, the radius, and it no longer climbs the wall, that means it's picked up enough debris that it's got so heavy it can't pull itself up off the bottom. You certainly need to take it out and clean it.
Okay.
And to take it out, you've got this button that says lift, and you can push and hold that lift button in, and in theory it's going to climb the wall wherever it is. And it's a pretty good theory, but sometimes it doesn't always climb the wall right where you want it to climb. Sometimes you just turn it off, but this one actually worked out pretty good. And you just grab onto it,
Yeah.
you know, pump everything out. And like I say, you can either use that lift button like that,
Right.
or you can turn it off and then pull the
Pull
cord
the
to you, but
cord.
don't lift it out with the cord.
Yeah. Okay.
Just take it to the surface and then grab the handle.
Yeah.
It has this button that says Polaris. You can
Okay.
push that in,
Okay. Oh,
take
wow.
that out, and you can see the debris it's been
Yeah.
cleaning up. I'm gonna dump it in your garbage can.
Yeah.
They've never been able to keep up.
Wow.
So anyway, you know, you just
Empty
take
it.
that apart.
Yeah.
It's got that male and female, just snaps.
Okay. Drop that back
It
in
has
there.
that track and that rail.
Yep.
So just drop back in place. That drops down.
Throw it back in the pool and
Yeah.
tell it to go back to work.
And you gotta wait till it's submerged. It's the best thing to do is wait for it to submerge before you turn it on. And you'll
Okay.
see that cleaner, you know, it'll sometimes get up on the steps. It's got up on this bench a few times.
Right.
If it gets up to the point where it's sucking air, it shuts itself off for a little bit and then tries to back itself up or get off. So we've got that start stop button, so I just
Start it
selected
again.
it,
Uh-huh.
yep, and it's just gonna take off.
Okay.
Now, when you take it out of the pool, you know, it'll stand right here. The
Uh-huh.
wheels are there, and the brush, it splits that.
Okay.
You just wrap that cord up on the back side.
Okay.
This can take a little bit of rain, but it can't take those super hard downpours.
Yeah.
So, if we're gonna leave it outdoors, make sure it's covered. Or some people get those little Weber barbecue covers.
Yeah. Put it
They'll
over
just
that.
drape it over the top of that and cinch it off so that way it can get
Okay.
rained on. Or
Okay.
anything. So between the coping and the deck, there's that gap.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're also the ones that put that mastic in there. And so you'll be getting a call or a text from Ashley saying, hey, we'd like to come out and put the mastic in. She always does that usually a day or two, sometimes 3 days ahead of time to make sure there's no people or no pets.
Okay.
Because it goes in as a liquid, and after a half hour it takes on the consistency of gum on a hot day where it gets really gooey.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna be doing landscaping out here, or people doing some work out here, just tell us. We don't care. We make a big loop around the city every couple of days. We'll call you the next time we're over here.
Okay.
Just people need to stay out of the backyard the day that goes in.
Okay.
Punch list items. So I'll turn to my punch list. I'll know you're missing the lids. That weir door with the weir door is that little float that's inside there.
Uh-huh.
That one's got a bunch of grout in it, so it's not allowing that thing to be as free as I would like to see it be. So the tile coping guys have to come out and clean that up a little bit.
Okay.
But everything else